We're going to do a problem that involves finding the rate of change or the slope of a function if we have 2 points. And then we're going to write the equation of the function. So the first thing we need to do is find the slope. If you know the slope formula, it's essentially change in y over change in x. That little triangle means it's called a delta. It's a Greek letter, and it just means the change in. And change essentially means difference. That means we're subtracting. That means we're subtracting the y values on top of the fraction, and we're subtracting the x values on the bottom of the fraction. So all I have to do is find my y values. My first y value is -5. And then from -5, I'm going to subtract 5. And then my x values, I have -3 and 1. So I'll subtract -3 minus 1. Now if I simplify this, I get -5, take away 5 gives me -10. And -3 minus 1 gives me -4. And since I have a negative over a negative, it will become positive. And I can also reduce the fraction. Because they're both divisible by 2, I would get 5 over 2 is my slope, or my rate of change. So if we put a line in slope-intercept form, you might remember y equals mx plus b is the general form for a line, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So that's why it's called slope-intercept form. So in order for me to get the equation, I have I have 5 over 2 is my slope, so I'm going to replace m with 5 over 2, and then I have x plus b. So as you can see, I'm almost there. The only problem is I don't know what b is. I don't know what the y-intercept is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of these points. It doesn't matter which point. I can pick this point or I can pick that point, and I can substitute it into this equation. I'll just substitute in a y value here and an x value here. So I'm going to choose this one because it's positive. It looks a little bit easier. So I'll replace the y with 5. 5 equals 5 over 2. And then I'll replace the x with the 1. So 5 over 2 times 1 plus b. Now I can solve this equation and get the value of b. So it's really just 5 equals 5 over 2 plus b. And if I want to get the b by itself, I subtract 5 over 2 from both sides. It cancels from here, and I get b is 5 take away 5 over 2. In order to subtract these fractions, I need a common denominator. So I'm really doing 5 over 1 minus 5 over 2. To get a common denominator, I need to make the bottom of this fraction 2. In order to get it to be 2, I have to multiply it by 2, which means I must also multiply the top by 2. So 10 over 2 is equivalent to 5 over 1. And then I can subtract 5 over 2. 10 minus 5 is 5. And then I keep the 2 there. So b ends up being also 5 over 2. So this is a case where the slope and the y-intercept are the same thing. Now all I have to do is write this in a slope-intercept form. So I'm just going to plug it in here. And since this is a function, I'm going to use function notation. So instead of writing y equals, I'm actually going to use f of x equals. And then I write it in the form m, the slope is 5 over 2, times x, and then the b is also 5 over 2. So this would be my linear equation. Another way to write it would just be using y. So y equals 5 over 2x plus 5 over 2. Both of these would be correct. The only difference is this one is using function notation and this is using regular notation, but they're both fine.